down Parliament. They can go and borrow. And then they come back to the central government, Minister of Finance, okay, could you give us guarantee? Now, these are huge. In the IFSAPs, under accrual, you can disclose that in the notes. And it's hidden there. But people want to know how much guarantees has the central government given out. How much? To subnational governments, to the national government, and for what purposes? We also have contingent liabilities. In many of these countries, increasingly were becoming litigious countries. So every now and then, and because some lawyers and shrewd financiers, the easy and the quick way is that any fault by this government, you take it to court. And then you win the case because the Attorney General's office is weak, cannot defend the country. And nobody feels the impact of these cases. So the court issues an order and gives an award. And in one country I know of where these court cases have accumulated to an enormous liability. And they say, well, we are contesting that and that liability there. And when you look at the laws for public financial management, they say court awards are a direct charge to the consolidated fund. Whether you budget for it or not, once the court has awarded, it must be paid from the consolidated fund of budget. So then how can you have trust in the public sector when you have these problems? The other issue is about those outstanding commitments. You may have heard about what we call the medium-term expenditure framework. Governments enter into 3-year or 4-year commitments, say, for constructions of hospitals or construction of dams for electricity generation, or like in your case is the nuclear power station, for example. I mean, these are projects which go beyond 1 year, and we follow a cash basis of budgeting, where the annual appropriations expires at the end of the year, and then you have projections. Now, yes, if you follow the RFS, you can disclose those commitments in the notes, but a disclosure note is not just sufficient. It's too, you hide away a lot of information. Yes, so thank you. So under the current reporting, the statement of financial performance is useful, but I think it needs to be improved on. To take into account program budgeting, which is a big issue in some of the countries, the state of financial position is very much understood and useful, but only if it can be made more simpler for people to understand. Statement of changes in network, on the changes in equity and other side, is still useful, but not very much understood. And I don't have time to illustrate some of this and see the problems. The cash flow is very straightforward, that the accounting policy. But there are also other critical statements that need to be. In the IPSARs or IRFS, these are the primary functions up there. But for the public sector, must we stop there? Could we improve by considering budget execution report? That's a statement of appropriation. In some countries, that statement is very important. And in one country I know, in the way we've been developing a new law for public finance, it is a mandatory statement that before Parliament considers the finance bill for the next fiscal year, the Auditor General must report on the budget execution of the previous, of the current financial year, the performance of the budget. But this is not, there's no guidance on the IPSAS on this. And why should we not provide? Statement of the sovereign debt I've already covered, the commitments, commitment liabilities, and also reporting on the program-based budgeting. So public finances are about public interest. Need more engagement, and it should be focused on reporting on service delivery. And that means that we need not to just restrict ourselves to the traditional private sector reporting. And there's a need for convergence, harmonization, and having more uniform. Keep it simple, stupid. And we have another big problem. In many of the African countries and others in the developing countries, you have very small countries as well, small islands. Must they comply with the IPSAS in full? In the private sector, you have the IFRS for those companies which are listed to stock exchange, and they have to comply with that. But then you also have the small, medium enterprises. They have their own standard, which is kept simple. And I remember when I was having a meeting with the Minister of Finance for Somalia, and he said, Stephen, must we comply with all these complicated standards? Can't we have a more simpler way for a fragile state like Somalia starting to be accountable? So I think for the public sector, I think we need to have two standards. For the big nations like the United Kingdom, they have all the resources, they have big money to spend and so forth. But for a small country like Rwanda or Uganda or fragile states like South Sudan, they should also have a standard specific for smaller nations. Keep it simple, more transparent, and so that people can regain trust in the public sector. And above all, we should think more for the public sector. Yes, good practice in the private sector, but we must adapt to the public sector strictly. Not just changing words in the statement, in the standards. Yeah? That instead of calling the statement of this, we should call it in the statement. But we should fundamentally think and make it more. And of course, the challenge now we have this IPSAS or EPSAS, and for goodness sake, I think there should be a move towards convergence and making it simple and not have standards competing with each other. Countries in Africa will be in a dilemma when EPSAS comes on board, and then we have, they will ask, okay, so which one? EPSAS or IFRS? Because UK is on IFRS. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this.